Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Delhi Birth Network Birth Story Circle, which is now online. My name is Neha. As you know, I'm a childbirth educator and a birth doula. And I have with me today Devaki and her little one who's sitting on her lap there. We're going to hear her birth story of her second child. And yeah, if we can start with first knowing a little bit about you.
Okay. So Neha, thanks for this opportunity. I'm very lucky that I actually got to know about the network and to work with you a little bit. So this is a great opportunity. So thanks for that. My name is Devaki, as you know. This is Calliope, Callie isko bulate hain, and I am a public health researcher actually. So I spend a lot of my time thinking about how health systems fail mothers and what we can do about it, and found myself in the situation, and now twice I found myself in the situation of being on the other side. So that's been interesting, and I'm happy to share more about that as we go along.
Thanks so much for volunteering to share your story. And so, tell us first a little bit about your pregnancy journey. What was it like from the time you came to know that you're having another child? I know you have two birth stories, but we'll stick
Yeah.
to one of them. So, from the
Okay.
time you came to know that you were expecting your second child, what was it like? What were the early months like? What were the thoughts on your mind? What came up from your previous experience?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Okay. So this second one was actually unplanned. We were doing great with Cleo, who was sort of the center of our universe, apart from her older canine sibling, Maya, who is also the center of our universe. So we figured we have two centers of our universe, and that's enough. And we were just so fulfilled with having a little baby girl. And then all of a sudden I realized I was pregnant, and there was all of this stuff about, oh, this could not have come at a more complicated time. With my work, I was just getting back into it. And we were really enjoying our older one actually, and had figured out our groove. But then there was also this excitement of, oh my god, a sibling, and both of us are have siblings. So we had at one point sort of thought about the idea of having a sibling for Cleo, and here it was, the opportunity. So I think there was a bit of trepidation. I'm also what you call a geriatric mom. So I was just shy of 38 when I had Callie, and my earlier pregnancy was also just kind of, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It was really fantastic. We were living outside of Delhi, which can actually kind of a hectic place to go through gestation and be pregnant and also be working and all of that. So I'd had this wonderful pregnancy last time outside of Delhi, and that really sort of shaped my expectations about how this one would go. And I also, so going into the pregnancy, going into my middle and later trimesters, there was pollution, there was all that stuff, all the fuss that comes with being in Delhi. And I think I actually had a lot of anxiety in my second pregnancy about how things would go, partly because of the very high standards set by my first pregnancy, and partly because of just being in Delhi, which I hadn't done before. And I think the stress is associated with it, and then, juggling everything and whatever. And then another very weird thing happened, which is part of why I reached out to the Birth Network through a dear friend, Janet. I was actually, as part of my work, we were, looking at research on pregnancy and the idea of obstetric violence, and this idea of sort of episiotomies and how intrusive and how difficult they can be. Something in me sort of clicked, because I'd had an episiotomy in what was otherwise a very, very positive birth experience. And just reading about other women's testimonials about that just, made me feel like, oh, had I just not realized that things could have gone better? Was I not in tune in the way that I thought I was? And what can I do about this? So I had this sort of panic, really, kind of towards the end of my second trimester. And I was reaching out for resources. And again, I was connected with Neha. And I called you, and I spoke to you, Neha, about sort of the weirdness of having had actually a very good birth experience the first time, and then just being still very anxious about the other because of this episiotomy piece. I delivered at a hospital. I was planning to deliver at the same hospital, but then I was also having these panic attacks, like, do I need to leave Delhi? Should I go to some other state? Should I leave the country? What can I do? I don't want to be here. A lot of anxiety, really. And most of the people around me were like, what's wrong with you? Like, you're so lucky. You're so privileged. Like, come on. So there was a bit of guilt also, like, what's my problem? Like, everything's going fine. I have job security. Like, I had great support at work. My husband is a dream. Like, all of that was great. So what's my deal? But I think I just needed to be able to talk to someone and be in a different kind of safe space. So I think reaching out to the network and having some of Neha's support gave me that kind of a space. And I think then, where in my second trimester I'd been thinking about I'm going to leave the country and let me research how I can do this and whatever, I moved into a space of sort of surrender, really, and kind of being more attentive. And it ended up being towards the third trimester that I really started to focus. And I think there was energy around me also, even colleagues at work who were saying, surrender to the things you can't control and really listen to the stuff that you can control and kind of get into that groove, because because it's there, like, you have to get into it. So we ended up being able to go away in the winter. So that big pollution fear that I had, we, again, with our privilege, were able to go away down south up in the mountains. And I had a nice sort of transition into the third trimester. And then in the beginning of the third trimester, a couple of conversations with Neha about how the last time went, sort of what I'm telling you now, how the last time went, and then what were my anxieties about going further, and how she could help. And actually Neha was like, you don't need my help. We can chat. But I remember I was like, huh? I've never heard of anyone saying that kind of stuff to me. But you did help me, Neha, and we had a couple of these conversations. And I started to get better at listening to myself and listening to Callie. And I started to focus on that a lot more. And I think there was a sense of calm then that came into me as I moved in towards the end of my third trimester.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And while you were speaking, I realized that you brought up something really important. And a lot of us in our first births, especially, and I felt that too, we kind of just go into the system trusting that the system will take care and of whatever we need, and whatever needs to be done will be done. And where my birth too, the first time around, went pretty smoothly from the conventional view. It was a normal birth and the baby was healthy, and so everyone was like, congratulations, all good.
Yeah.
But somewhere when you think about it, you realize that in some ways you felt a little, if I may use a strong word, violated or disrespected. But what you were feeling wasn't heard, or you weren't asked. When you think about that, then you realize that, hey, it's not just about what happened, but how it left me feeling, and how it leaves you feeling has a huge impact on the kind of mother that you become, the kind of parent that you become. So I think I felt that when I spoke to you. And like you said, when we had that conversation, you said, yeah, my birth was good and I had a normal birth, and the baby was well and everything was smooth. And I'm thinking that, why is she calling me then? There's obviously something that she wants. And I remember asking you that, so what do you want different this time? And you were like, I don't know, maybe I just want to feel better at the end of the birth. So the experience part of it, how you felt and how the baby felt, our institutions don't give importance to that. So I think you brought that up, and that was really all I think that changed for you the second time you realized how important that was, and you owned it for yourself. And you said very beautifully that you can't always change everything, but at least you're there. And you're like, okay, I know it's going to be like that. Fine. I'm okay with it. And you're able to accept it and surrender to it, and then it doesn't hurt you.
Exactly. Also, and Neha, also, I think there's a bit there about, what you were saying with the first pregnancy. It took me a long time to find my OB. And once I did, I was like, what do I know, so there's this balance on the one hand in the second pregnancy between surrender, but then also assertion and being like, I still may not get what I want, but I want to put out to the universe some of these things. So like I communicated to my OB the problems I had with episiotomy. So, and he's a wonderful doctor, and he talked about it with me, and it was really nice, as opposed to just sort of hearing about friends being freaked out about episiotomies, and then at my delivery, in a very gentle way, the first time around, my OB saying, I'm just going to do this. No consent, but I'm just going to do this. And so me being like, but then still feeling violated. And then, so the second time I'd had this conversation, and, he said that, look, I may still need to do it, but blah, blah, blah. So there was a mindfulness that I had around it also. And I think he also was like, oh, okay, she's in this kind of place. And I think that kind of communication is not at all, as you said, normative, even in the best of circumstances, frankly, everywhere. So I think that was a big sort of difference for me the second time around as well.
True. Thanks so much for bringing that up. That's a really important important conversation to have when we talk about births. It's not just whether you had a C-section or a normal birth, or whether you had an episiotomy or you didn't. It is about how that felt for you, what that did to you. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about how your second birth went? What was that experience like? What were the events like? How did it unfold? How did it feel for you this time?
Okay, so my second daughter's timing was impeccable. She came a week early, and as it happened, Neha was out of town too. So we'd been like, okay, we'll catch up next week. And I had a very, very busy week planned before my delivery, lots of meetings and work and, wrapping up and whatever. And, and I had this sort of confidence because of that earlier process of going into sort of surrender and whatever. And it was a Sunday, I remember, the 9th of February. And around 1 a.m., I started feeling some pain, and I was thinking, oh, ye to Braxton Hicks hai. And I just kept an eye out though, because it started to already feel a little bit different, and I was thinking, I had chole, like what's happening, whatever. And I just kept an eye on it. And but there was discomfort through the morning, and then at around 9ish, we got in touch with the doctor. And he said, well, see how you go, time them, what we did last time. And if you're really progressing to that sort of 5 to 7 minute, or in your case, maybe even 10 minutes, because there's a bit of a distance between us and the hospital, he said, just let me know and we'll get started with you, otherwise, let's just see how we go. So the day progressed, and, it was sort of, the contraction spacing was like kind of all over the place for a while. And then suddenly it became 10, and then quite quickly it became 7. So we let the doctor know, and he said, okay, main pahunch raha hu, you also get there. And this was maybe in the afternoon, maybe around 3 or 4. Yeah, maybe around 4:30 or something. And then we reached the hospital in about half an hour, 45 minutes. And again, it was not just insane pain or anything like that, but it really did feel like something was happening. And we went to the attending at the hospital, and my OB hadn't reached yet, but he had informed this gentleman, and he was expecting me. So that was nice. I got there, and it wasn't like gone or whatever. And my doctor is also, if anything, sort of very aggressive about the private healthcare system in India, and how it can be very extractive and exploitative. And, so he had really sort of set things up quite carefully for us. So that was really nice. But he was like, go through this entrance, don't go through that. And so we had that support from him. So we showed up, and I had used one of these apps to time my contractions. So, and I showed it to the attending, and I think an intern who was with him. And they were like, do you even know what a contraction is? And I was like, I've had a kid, I know what a contraction is. But then also realizing that I don't need to be like, aapki kya majal, whatever. There's no point getting upset, and like, this is what they're used to. But at the same time, definitely offended that they were like, how do you know? And then there was this piece, kind of hilariously, where the doctor was like, I'll tell you if you're having a contraction. I was like, oh, okay, buddy. And they hooked me up to a couple of those machines. Meanwhile, the intern's freaking out, seeing something in my medical record saying, aapka to previa hai, aapka to ye hai. And I was just thinking, I know about some of these things, and I know not to freak out about some of these things. But if I were a first time mom, I think with this kind of an interaction, my stress levels would have been very different, you know. So I was sort of like thanking my stars, ki, okay, maybe this is a false alarm and I'm not freaking out about it either way, you know. So he hooked me up to all of those machines. The heartbeat was fine, and you know, and then he asked me to tell him about a contraction, and he wanted to feel my abdomen to see if the baby had descended or where the baby was. And he was like, "Nothing has happened, you know. So it's up to you." And again, you know, this was nice. He was like, "It's up to you if you want to stay here. I'm not sure you need to, but you can stay. You're welcome to stay and get admitted, but you probably just want to go home and see how things go." So I was a bit embarrassed, but Leon, my partner, my husband, was like, "Chalo, yaar, whatever, it's fine." And we got down to the bottom of the hospital, and he was like, "You know, I want some pav bhaji. There's a Haldiram's here." So we went there, and I started feeling a little thirsty. I was sitting with a bottle of water. He's having his pav bhaji. He puts the last piece of pav bhaji in his mouth, and I like massively wet myself, you know, like my waters break inside that Haldiram. And this poor cleaning guy is like, he was right there, you know. So I think he was just like, yeah, yeah. Anyway, so my waters broke, and then the pain became much, much, much more acute. And Callie was really sort of on her way. And I was like, oh, okay, let's go back up. So we went back up, and this attending was super embarrassed. And he was like, well, let me just look at you. Let me just look at you. And of course, I wanted to be on all fours because I was like, I can't turn around for you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So this poor guy is like trying to see what's happening, and I'm refusing to turn. And I think a lot of that really, I don't know, it was just I like knew that I wanted to do that, you know, and I didn't really care that they wanted me to turn around and do X or Y. And I really feel like I was being instructed by my daughter at this point. Um, and I could really, I think, having spoken to Neha about all the ways that your children will really tell you what's sort of going on and how you need to be. Somehow I managed to get in that zone, you know, and I could really feel her sort of moving. It was so cool. I could feel her moving, and I could feel like I needed to be like this because that was maybe going to make it easier for her, or maybe make it easier for me to bear the pain. And these poor guys were like scrambling around me. So they're like, let's go. We got to go to the OT right now. So we dashed off. My partner went down to do the paperwork to get me admitted. They, you know, we were like, they're going to get me changed. I ended up not changing because I delivered 7 minutes later. So I had only about 7 minutes of active labor, and she just came right out. She was like, ta-da! And she, you know, and it was amazing. I mean, the pain was outrageous. And I think Leon, when he came up with the admission paperwork, was like, kya ho gaya? And they were like, haan, ho gaya, you know, poor chap. So he missed this one. And my screaming had apparently scared some of the moms in the ward because it was insane. And it was just, I was almost watching her, not watching her, like feeling her come out, you know? She just ran the show. And even the doctor was like, oh, okay. You know, I mean, it was incredible. And it just underscores for me, you know, all this, you know, and maybe I'm anti-establishment in saying this, but all this focus on institutional deliveries, it's really the most natural of things that will really just happen wherever you let it, you know?
Yeah. And the fact that no one knows better than you. You knew that you were in labor, you knew that it was going to happen today, but somewhere around you were being told that no, you don't know. We know better.
Yeah.
We'll tell you when it's going to happen. But you knew. So, and it's amazing that despite being in an institution, you literally did what you had to do.
Oh yeah, and frankly, it's not even me that did it. Like this one did it. She was just like, okay, main aa rahi hu. And she came out, and this doc was just like, okay, you know, and poor chap, I mean, I think he just really felt quite foolish. My OB still hadn't shown up. She was delivered. Then they, you know, they worked on the placenta and whatever. They were just really sort of reeling themselves, they and the nurses. And it kind of felt like, this is how it should be, you know. You know, you're safe, but you're also letting the process happen. You're not inducing and this and that and all of that. So, you know, and then there was this intense relief. And I think one specific thing, Neha, that you had told me was, and I asked them to put her on me immediately, which they did. They were intending to actually also. and she sort of crawled straight up to the breast. And I mean, it was so great, I was so proud of her more than anybody else. um, so that part of it was great. And then my husband sort of shows up and is like, "Whoa," and then we hear the best news that it's a girl. So we were just like, "Oh my god." So all of those things, there was just this flurry of just very positive energy and excitement. And then there was a bit of the placenta came out, that was absolutely fine. And then um, uh, the other thing that I should mention is, in all of this, while she was barreling out, um, the attending asked me, he said, "Listen, she's really ready to come out. I'm going to cut you. I'm going to do an episiotomy because she's just ready to come out." And at that point, he sort of like, "I'm going ahead. Is that okay?" And I was like, "Listen, if you can avoid it, that would be better." And he's like, "Listen, it'll go longer. I really feel like she's ready to come out." So at that point, there was a bit of a samjhauta between the both of us, and I was like, "Just do it." So I did get another episiotomy, but I think I was a bit more in control of the situation that time around. I also now don't think I needed it. It would have probably gone just fine without it. A couple of minutes more, or maybe half an hour more, or something like that. But it happened. She came out. I'm sort of okay with it. Like, I don't think I have the kind of concern I did with my first pregnancy around it, especially because when I was stitched up, it was my OB who did it. In fact, that's what I was more nervous about, like, who's going to do my stitches now that this has happened. Like, I don't want this to then become a whole other thing in my reproductive health. um, so I did have another episiotomy, the thing that I feared the most, but I think it didn't quite happen in this violative way that I was worried about. I think everything was amazing this time, but with a new kind of mindfulness that I hadn't experienced the first time around. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful to her, really. It was so amazing.
That is so beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing that story. And I think you make it sound really easy.
No, it's horrible. And I scared the crap out of the other women in the hospital. So Leon was like, "What did you do?" Later, like when we were sort of chilling with Callie in the room, she was like, "You've really, these other women who are incidentally still in labor," he was like, "You've really like become notorious in this ward, because on the one hand, there were these ear-splitting shrieks that you gave out, and then they were like for this much time, and then, it's one of the shortest active labors they've seen in a while here. Like, everyone's like, ye kya ho gaya, It was really painful. It was outrageous in that way. But I think in the weirdest of ways, if you're kind of planning on listening and being a bit more mindful, you somehow manage to get into that space. That's incredible. And I don't know how to sort of convey that to people, because it's a very personal journey, but it's so cool when it happens. I really wish it for all moms. It's incredible.
I think you put that so well. It's not that it's easy. It's not going to go as you plan. It's not going to be easy, but that doesn't mean that it is going to be traumatic. It can still be positive. A positive birth is not a birth that happens exactly as per your plan, because almost no births happen exactly as per your plan.
Just letting your mind be as flexible as your body is being right now, just kind of having that be a full experience for yourself. And it's really a gift you can give to yourself. It's incredible when you're able to let that happen for you.
Thanks so much. My next question is, how do you think that affects your early days? How does having a birth that leaves you feeling good and empowered, if I can use that word, how does that affect the early days? Because it isn't over. I mean, there are still more challenges and more bumps on the road. And how did that go for you? And how did that link up with, your pregnancy and your birth?
So that part was interesting, Neha, because like I told you, I delivered a week earlier than I had planned, and I had really sort of backloaded all of my handover stuff at work, and then just feeling a little bit of anxiety around how to handle that part, because I just really wanted to not be involved with it, but I also wanted to hand it over. So there was frankly a bit of anxiety around that. And then I'd also heard from some friends about how breastfeeding and so on. It's hard. Again, it's one of those things that getting started and having that motivation and keeping things going is hard. I was very, very keen on extended breastfeeding and exclusive breastfeeding both. I did that with my first one. I was very gung ho about doing it with my second, and with some of my friends, they really had trouble. So I didn't. There's those couple of days when you're like, oh, is this gonna go the way that I want? And it's kind of not. But maybe it's one of the things of being a geriatric mom. I was a bit more patient with myself, I guess. And that kind of stuff went okay. It took us about a week or two to really sort of settle in. But she was a champ. Again, once I started just really being like, let me figure out what she needs. Let me just listen to her. It's so easy. They make it really, really easy, and slowly it gets easier and easier for you. It's always super hard in the beginning, but then, your body starts to listen also to your child. So, and then that bond gets tighter and tighter. So it's just incredible, but also involves that surrender.
We get bogged down by, these are the things that I need to do in order to breastfeed well, in order to be, to take care of my baby. You don't need to do anything. You just need to be there, present in that moment, and watch your baby and respond to what your baby is telling you. Okay, so my last question is related to what's going on in the world right now. Your baby came just pretty much when things started hotting up. So how did this whole pandemic situation and the lockdown affect you in any way, if it did?
So that's an interesting question. I think on the whole, I've just been feeling very grateful. One big thing is having the whole family unit together. So my husband would have otherwise had to go off to work, but he's around much more, and he definitely blows off work all the time and his calls and whatnot to hang out with the girls. So that's been tremendous. So as a family unit, we've had that time. On the other hand, with the extended family, it's been harder because his parents, of course, live in another state. My parents also, I guess, live in NCR, so another state. So having that grandparent kind of piece is something that we have missed. And then also, it's been a bit full on without help, obviously, with the lockdown. But, again, there's this sort of piece of how you want to receive that, and just being so grateful that we have the resources to keep everything going. Yes, we're running our own house, but we're running our own house. Like, my husband's been cooking wonderful food, which I'm sure this one's enjoying through nursing, and we're incredibly lucky, and I think trying to focus on that much more than some of the inconveniences is also important. And I'm not saying I didn't have my moments and a little bit of the postpartum sort of piece of the blues and the adjustment and some of those kinds of things. But I knew to try to be more patient with myself. I'm also grateful in a weird way that this is not something that affects babies and lactating mothers to the extent that it does other age groups and populations. And, so I'm very grateful for that. And then, of course, one hears about, so I have friends who work in this space with some of the mums who are migrants, who are just, not getting food, feeding sugar water to their children. I mean, it's outrageous. So this COVID has really brought out the worst in a lot of situations across the country. And so there's a helplessness about that, but then also protectiveness about, like, I'm going to try to make this the best time for such a critical period for babies,
Thanks so much for that really balanced view on this. And I think that's what it is. There are some things that we miss in this situation, but there are a lot of positives that come with it. And I see, for as far as a family unit is concerned, as far as a young child, who all that young child needs is the closeness with the parents. As far as that is concerned, this has only made it actually better in some sense. So, yeah.
And developing patience as parents and trying to work on yourself also as a parent. I think this has been, I hope that people see this as an important opportunity to do that and find other ways of connecting with extended family, and try to use some of our privilege in meaningful ways.
Very true. Thanks so much for sharing your story, which was full of so many lovely lessons, I would say, and I'm sure a lot of people will benefit watching this. Thank you so much.
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you so much. I think you're a big part of why this went the way that it did. So I'm very
My
grateful.
pleasure. I feel equally as blessed.
Thanks.
Thank you.